I poured wine for a merchant from Richmond, perhaps the very man who had contracted for the tobacco we had sabotaged, and I wondered what he would say when his shipment arrived ruined. The clinking of glasses, the laughter of the guests, and the casual chatter of wealthy men and women barely reached me. My mind was up. I could feel the pulse of my plan coursing through the room like an unseen current, invisible yet inevitable, waiting to strike at the heart of Jenkins's wealth and pride. The merchant raised his glass in a toast, a gesture meant to honor Jenkins's hospitality, but I imagined it instead as a toast to the ruin that awaited him, the fate of his precious tobacco unknowingly sealed by my hands. As the meal progressed, I noticed Overseer Wilson slip into the dining room. He approached Jenkins, leaning close to whisper in his ear. Jenkins's expression shifted subtly, from mild annoyance at the interruption to a twitch of concern, a storm behind carefully maintained composure. "Excuse me, gentlemen, ladies," Jenkins said, rising from his chair, his voice tight but courteous. "A small matter requires my attention. Please continue enjoying your meal." He followed Wilson from the room, leaving me with Naomi's eyes on me. Something was happening, something urgent, something urgent. Had our sabotage been discovered already? My chest tightened, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. 20 minutes later, Jenkins returned. His face was flushed, anger poorly concealed beneath the mask of a forced smile. "A minor issue with one of the tobacco barns," he explained to his guests. "Nothing to concern ourselves with today." His words were casual, but his eyes betrayed the storm brewing within him. The rest of the dinner passed with Jenkins trying too hard. His laughter louder than necessary, his gestures exaggerated. Every movement was an effort to maintain the facade of the successful, composed host, while a silent panic gripped him from the inside. I observed silently, feeling a perverse satisfaction. The subtle tremors of his confidence were already mine to witness. After the guests had departed, the servants, including myself and Naomi, began the laborious cleanup. The silverware glinted in the candlelight as we scrubbed and polished, but my mind was far from the mundane work. From the edge of the dining hall, I could hear raised voices from the direction of the curing barns. Jenkins, Wilson, and the new overseers were engaged in a heated argument, their words sharp enough to carry across the still night air. "I don't care how it happened." Jenkins's voice cut through the quiet. "Fix it. That tobacco represents a $15,000 contract." The weight of the sum made the threat in his tone heavier, a reminder of the stakes we were manipulating. "We're trying, sir," one of the new overseers replied. "But the damage is spreading, and some of it looks deliberate. The word echoed in my mind like a hammer striking iron. They were beginning to suspect. A shiver of anticipation ran down my spine, but it was accompanied by a cold knot of dread. The stakes had escalated, and though I had planned for chaos, the danger was no longer theoretical. It was immediate. The night deepened, shadows growing longer in the corners of the plantation house. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant cough seemed amplified, and yet the true noise came from within me. A quiet, fierce satisfaction, tempered by the understanding that the next days would bring tests of cunning and courage unlike any we had faced before. Naomi brushed past me silently, her presence a silent acknowledgement that we shared this burden, this dangerous delight. The work we had done, the care we had taken to ensure the sabotage went undetected until now had been precise, almost surgical. And now the first tremors of our success rippled outward. That night before retiring to my small quarters, I lingered at the window, looking out over the darkened barn. The rain had begun, a gentle drizzle at first, then heavier, washing the fields and paths. I imagined the tobacco leaves inside the barns, the mold spreading silently, imperceptibly, and I smiled. A private, almost imperceptible curl of lips. Justice, in some small, imperfect measure, was already underway. This was the beginning. One careful move had set the dominoes into motion, and soon everything Jenkins had relied upon, everything he considered untouchable, would come crashing down. I did not sleep well that night. My dreams were filled with the rustling of tobacco leaves, the angry shouts of overseers, and the shadowed faces of those who would soon face the consequences of our carefully plotted rebellion. Yet beneath it all, beneath the fear and the thrill, burned a steady flame, resolve. Marcus, Naomi, Solomon, and I had all risked everything for a glimpse of justice, for a chance at retribution, and I would not allow hesitation or mercy to undermine what we had set in motion. By dawn, the plantation would awaken to the first true fruits of our labor, and I would be ready, a shadow among shadows, watching as the world of the Jenkins family trembled. By morning, The plantation was in uproar. Jenkins had ordered every available slave to the curing barns to try to salvage what could be saved. The smell of damp, rotting tobacco filled the air, a pungent and bitter aroma that clung to my clothes, my skin, and my thoughts. I worked alongside the others, keeping my face calm, maintaining the mask of concern and obedience, all the while feeling a fierce satisfaction burn quietly beneath the surface. The mold had spread farther than I had anticipated, consuming nearly half the premium tobacco, while the rest carried subtle but unmistakable defects, uneven drying, discoloration, and the bitter taint from the dogwood berries we had planted weeks before. Each imperfection, each sign of ruin was a triumph, invisible yet complete, a silent message only we could understand. The overseers shouted directions, their voices brittle with anger and frustration. Wilson barked orders at the top of his lungs, swinging his arm toward a particularly damaged batch. "Separate it, all of it, and don't touch the rest with your filthy hands." His contempt stung, though I let it wash over me like rain, letting it pass without acknowledgement. My mind was elsewhere, tracing the ripple effects of our sabotage through Jenkins's finances, through the contracts, through the carefully balanced pride he had held so high. The Richmond shipment was already doomed, a cornerstone of his income for the year now crumbling like the tobacco in his barns. I caught glimpses of Jenkins himself moving among the overseers, his face taut with controlled fury, the cracks in his mask visible to anyone willing to look. By the third day, the situation had deteriorated even further. The mold seemed to grow exponentially, as if fueled by some unseen force, while the remaining leaves showed blemishes we had engineered to mimic natural disease. Every test sample burned in the merchant's earlier inspection had revealed the bitter taint of dogwood, and now, even without examination, Jenkins could see it in the warped textures and colors of his crop. Rumors of the Richmond merchant's dissatisfaction had already begun to filter through the county. Jenkins's panic was contagious, and it spread like wildfire among the white men who believed their world was built on certainty. But certainty, I knew, was an illusion we had shattered with careful hands. That morning, Solomon found me near the cookhouse. His face was grim, shadowed by concern. "They're questioning everyone who worked in the barns," he warned. "Marcus has already been interrogated twice." My heart froze. Marcus was calm and resolute, but the methods used by overseers could bend even the strongest will. "Do they suspect us?" I asked quietly, keeping my voice low so that none of the overseers or other slaves could overhear. Solomon shook his head slowly. "I don't think so. Not yet. But Jenkins is desperate for someone to blame. He's talking about bringing in slave breakers from Charleston." The words sank into me like a stone dropped into still water. Slave breakers were merciless, experts in extracting confessions through torture and fear. Few survived the ordeal intact. The thought of Marcus enduring such cruelty made my stomach churn. But I had foreseen this possibility, had prepared contingencies even before the sabotage began. "We accelerate our timeline," I said quietly. "The damage to the tobacco is done, but Jenkins still has other assets. We strike at those before he can recover." Solomon's eyes widened. "You want to do more now? The risk is already high." I nodded. "We might as well make it count. Hesitation will only give him time to regain control." 2 days later, Jenkins's desperation reached its peak. The Richmond merchant had cancelled the contract entirely, demanding the return of his deposit. Whispers of Jenkins's financial instability spread through the county like smoke over dry grass. Slave interrogations intensified, innocent men breaking under pressure, their terror manipulated as tools to uncover. That evening, as the storm intensified, we put the final phase of our plan into motion. While Jenkins and his overseers huddled in the main house, panicked and distracted by the ongoing collapse of his plantation, I slipped into the estate office adjacent to the house. Naomi had left a window unlatched earlier, a small act of foresight that made my path into the room nearly effortless. Inside, the office was dim, lit only by intermittent flashes of lightning that revealed stacks of ledgers, each bound in heavy leather, recording every financial transaction, every sale, every profit and debt. Each book was a testament to Jenkins's control over lives as well as tobacco. I lit a small candle, careful to shield its glow. My hands trembled as I turned the first pages, reading silently. Here were entries of families torn apart, children sold for coins while parents were compensated with a pittance. My fingers traced the names. Esther sold for $35. Below it, a note in Jenkins's neat hand. Mother Ruth compensated $5. My chest tightened. $5. Could anything in the world truly compensate for the theft of a child? Could any act erase the years of separation, the night spent praying for her safety? Each page told a story of cruelty and calculated indifference, each life reduced to an accounting entry. I gathered the 5 ledgers spanning a decade of Jenkins's bookkeeping, careful to avoid alerting anyone, and moved toward the window. Outside, Solomon waited, drenched by the rain, ready to take the books and secure them. "You found them," he whispered. I nodded, passing the heavy tomes to him, feeling their weight as if it were the weight of every injustice Jenkins had committed. "Ensure they reach the right hands," I said. Solomon understood. These ledgers could topple a dynasty, reveal hidden debts, undeclared income, and expose the full breadth of Jenkins's financial manipulations. In the hands of creditors, tax authorities, or abolitionist allies, they could deliver a blow even more powerful than the ruined tobacco. But my personal vengeance had not yet reached its conclusion. I moved silently through the darkened house toward Jenkins's bedroom. The combination of his personal safe, a detail Naomi had observed and shared with me years ago, was simple: his birth date. Inside the iron box lay what I sought: deeds, certificates, loan documents, and most importantly, a pouch of gold coins. This gold, kept secret from the world, represented emergency funds, wealth that could be used immediately or invested elsewhere. I transferred the coins to a cloth bag, careful not to let even one escape, each one weighing the promise of freedom, of a new life, and perhaps even the chance to reunite with Esther. A sudden creak froze me. Mistress Jenkins stood in the doorway, candle in trembling hand, realization dawning in her eyes. "Ruth," she gasped. Her voice trembled with fear and outrage. I moved quickly, pressing my hand over her mouth, forcing her down onto the bed. The bag of gold pressed against my side. Heavy, warm, full of possibilities. $35, I hissed in her ear. "That's what your husband sold my daughter for. 10 years old. And you gave me $5 in return." Her eyes widened above my hand, confusion and fear mixing with anger. The rage that had built over years, the lashing, the humiliation, the sorrow, crystallized in that moment. Every lash, every stolen moment, every tear became a single clear purpose. But then I thought of Esther, of the child whose life depended on me, who had already endured so much. What would she think of her mother if I became a murderer? I released Mistress Jenkins, restraining her instead by binding and gagging her with strips torn from her own bed sheets. She would awaken to discover she had been restrained, her home violated, her power diminished, but alive. My purpose was not to destroy her life with blood, but to reclaim mine. Outside, the storm raged, masking our movements as we gathered to leave. Jenkins's voice echoed from the study, furious, frantic, the sound of a man whose empire was unraveling. "Someone will pay," he shouted. And indeed, someone was paying. Not with screams or lashes, but with the theft of the very lifeblood of his wealth and the assertion of freedom long denied. Solomon, Naomi, and the others waited, and together we vanished into the night. Freedom awaited, uncertain and perilous, but ours to claim at last. Behind us, the Jenkins plantation receded, a symbol of cruelty toppled, a legacy disrupted, a life reclaimed. The rain had turned the plantation paths into quagmires, mud sucking at our boots with every step. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the twisted shadows of the surrounding woods while thunder rolled overhead like a drumbeat of war. Yet the storm, violent as it was, became our ally. Each flash of lightning revealed nothing more than blurred silhouettes. Each downpour drowned our footprints, erasing the signs of our escape. Solomon led the way, Naomi and Daniel close behind, with myself and the others following, hearts hammering, lungs burning with exertion and fear. We moved north, following routes Solomon had memorized, the network of safe houses and sympathizers providing both guidance and refuge. The night air carried the scent of wet earth, of crops crushed under rainfall, of wood smoke from distant homes, an intoxicating mixture that reminded me of home and the life we had lost. Every shadow seemed a potential threat, every crack of a branch a warning of pursuit. Jenkins would not let the theft of his gold, his ledgers, and the ruin of his tobacco go unpunished. I imagined him, furious and impotent, barking orders at overseers, demanding confessions from terrified slaves, and likely blaming anyone unfortunate enough to be caught nearby. By the first light of dawn, we reached the edge of the next county. The rain had slowed, leaving only a fine drizzle, but the mud remained. Our boots were heavy with clay, clothes soaked through, yet the sense of freedom coursing through our veins lightened the burden. The night had been long and treacherous, but we had survived. "Stay low," Solomon whispered. motioning us to hide beneath a stand of evergreens as a farmer and his children emerged from their cabin. They passed by, unaware of the fugitives concealed in the shadows, the near misses sending adrenaline through me in sharp jolts. As the day progressed, we made careful, calculated movements. We rested only when necessary, often crouched behind thickets or under the canopy of forests. I used the time to scan our surroundings, to plan our next move, and to think of Esther. I imagined her safe and unaware that her mother was so close, plotting her return. The thought made my stomach tighten with both hope and anxiety. Could we navigate the dangers of the South once more? Could we enter Charleston, the very heart of the slave trade, without discovery? The answer, I knew, lay in careful preparation, trust in Solomon's network, and above all in remaining unseen. 2 days later, we arrived at the first safe house, a small farm owned by a Quaker family known for their abolitionist sympathies. The family greeted us without fear or suspicion, guiding us inside with warmth and quiet efficiency. They had been informed by previous contacts of the flight of fugitives from the Jenkins plantation, and they understood the gravity of our situation. "You're safe here tonight," the farmer said, leading us to a back room. "Tomorrow you'll continue north." The relief of this moment, of human kindness and understanding, brought tears to my eyes, tears I quickly brushed away. Safety, if only temporary, was a luxury we had earned through risk, cunning, and determination. While the others slept, exhausted from the exertions of travel and tension, I remained awake, counting the gold coins from Jenkins's safe by candlelight. Each coin represented not merely wealth but agency, the chance to buy freedom or aid others. 78 gold eagles, each worth $20, over $1,500 in total. Solomon joined me silently, watching as I meticulously recounted the coins. "A fortune," he observed quietly, yet I corrected him. "Freedom," I said firmly. "For us now, and perhaps for others later." He nodded in understanding, the weight of our shared purpose heavy between us. The night passed slowly. The storm had given way to a gentle rain, the rhythmic patter on the roof a lullaby, but sleep eluded me. I thought of Esther, of the years lost, of the stolen moments, of the stolen life. I thought of Marcus, hanging from the tree, a casualty of our vengeance, and a stark reminder that freedom was not without cost. Each memory fueled my resolve. We would reach Canada, we would reclaim what had been taken, and one day I would hold Esther in my arms once more, free and safe, and know that all we had endured, the anguish, the planning, the relentless nights of fear, had not been in vain. After nearly 3 weeks of treacherous travel, nights spent crouched in shadows and days hidden from prying eyes, the borders of Canada finally emerged before us like a promise. The landscape began to change subtly, the soil lighter, the trees unfamiliar, the air carrying a crispness and clarity that felt like it belonged to another world. Each step forward filled me with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Freedom, for the first time in my adult life, was no longer a dream or a distant hope. It was tangible, near enough to touch, and yet, I dared not relax entirely. Danger still lurked. Slave catchers prowled even in free states, and the Fugitive Slave Act meant no place in America was truly safe. But the thought of never having to look over my shoulder for the whip or the chains drove me onward. When we crossed the last river, the current icy against our legs as we waded through, a collective sigh of relief passed among our small band. Daniel, still clinging to my hand, looked up at me with eyes wide in disbelief. "Mama, we're free?" he asked, his voice trembling. I gathered him in my arms, hugging him tight, whispering reassurance that we were indeed free, that the storms and bloodshed, the stolen nights and stolen years, had all led to this moment. Naomi, ever steady, held our other companions close, ensuring their spirits lifted as we reached the safety of British soil. Solomon's face, usually so calm and composed, bore the weight of unspoken emotion, a mixture of pride, relief, and quiet exhaustion. Our first stop was a small settlement near St. Catharines, Ontario, a modest enclave of former slaves and sympathetic allies who welcomed us with cautious optimism. The community had carved out lives for themselves through labor, trade, and mutual support, yet they remained vigilant. Each house, each path, each friendly face held the tacit understanding that freedom was fragile and protection against pursuit was constant. Here we could finally rest, plan, and begin to rebuild the lives stolen from us by masters who believed wealth could outweigh human life. Work was found swiftly. I became a laundress for several households, using my skills to earn wages that could be saved or used to help others escaping bondage. Solomon's carpentry was immediately in demand, and Daniel began an apprenticeship with a blacksmith, learning the trade with a focus and determination that belied his young age. Each day as the sun rose over our new home, I reminded myself of why we had risked everything. Survival was not enough. Rebuilding, helping others, and ultimately reclaiming my daughter were the goals that kept the long nights of travel and fear from feeling wasted. The gold from Jenkins's safe remained a vital asset. I kept it hidden, only using portions to assist those in desperate need. Fugitives seeking safe passage north, abolitionists requiring supplies, or information brokers with details about Charleston and Wilkes. Every coin spent was a strategic choice, each expenditure a step toward both justice and reunion. The ledger of Jenkins's crimes, entrusted to Solomon, had already begun to take effect, exposing the accounting manipulations, sales, and family separations that had built his wealth. Rumors of his financial collapse spread slowly, vindicating our sacrifices and underlining the potency of knowledge wielded wisely. Over the months, we integrated into the community, learning its rhythms, its rules, and its networks. Esther, the thought of her constant, burned brightest in my heart. Contacts from the South brought snippets of information, confirmation that she was alive, that she had been kept in Charleston under Wilkes, and, crucially, that she had been taught to read. The knowledge was both hope and puzzle. If she could read, she could understand signals, letters, and instructions, offering a pathway for us to reclaim her without alerting her captor. My strategies began to take shape. Long before we would ever step foot back in the South, combining the use of forged documents, the discretion of trusted contacts, and the careful choreography of timing. One evening, as the winter frost began to loosen its grip on the land, I sat on the small porch of our modest home, Daniel asleep inside, Solomon beside me. Naomi hummed quietly from the kitchen. The wind carried a chill, yet warmth suffused the moment, the air thick with the sense of achievement that comes from surviving the impossible. Freedom had been attained, but not yet fully realized. True liberation, the reunion with my daughter, remained the ultimate goal. Each decision, each calculated risk, each piece of gold saved was a step toward that future. The world beyond the border felt strange and vast, yet for the first time it felt mine. No overseer, no master, no whip dictated my action. My body, once a tool of labor and fear, was now an instrument of choice and agency. And yet I carried with me the memory of all who had suffered, the weight of lives lost in pursuit of vengeance and justice. Marcus's death, Solomon's sacrifices, the terror of those interrogated, all of it fused into a resolve stronger than any chain. I would find Esther, I would restore our family, and I would ensure that the cruelty of the Jenkinses could harm no one ever again. Even as the winter snows began to melt, and our lives in Canada took on a rhythm of cautious stability, my thoughts were never far from Charles. Esther lived there, confined within the gilded cage of the Wilkes household, trained to obedience and entirely unaware of the peril and hope that hovered over her. Every detail mattered. Every plan, every alliance, every scrap of information had to be precise. Solomon, ever the careful strategist, became my co-conspirator in what would be the most dangerous journey of our lives. We began by gathering intelligence. Trusted contacts, free blacks who navigated the South with skill and subtlety, provided letters and occasional glimpses of Charleston's slave markets and the Wilkes estate. Each piece of information was carefully vetted. One wrong lead, one careless whisper, could result in disaster. I learned that Esther served as a companion to the young Miss Caroline, a sickly girl whose condition made her both a protected ward and a tool in Wilkes's manipulation of servants. The house was heavily guarded, every exit monitored, every servant scrutinized. Yet within the structure of strict discipline, there existed cracks, moments when a well-timed distraction or trusted helper could tip the balance in our favor. Our first task was acquiring credible cover. I assumed the identity of a free woman of color, traveling as a servant to a white abolitionist on business. Solomon, likewise, would accompany me as a loyal aide. Forged papers were painstakingly created, notarized in appearance, with every detail designed to withstand inspection at checkpoints, harbors, and along the roads. Even the simplest slip, an unfamiliar accent, a hesitation when questioned, could expose us. I practiced my role in private, memorizing the minutiae of my fabricated life, the kind of mundane details that could save or endanger us. Daniel remained in Canada with Naomi, their safety paramount, a reason to succeed and return victorious. The gold from Jenkins's safe became central to our plan. Not simply a resource for immediate survival, it was the currency of leverage and mobility. Contacts in Charleston, sympathetic ship captains and free blacks who moved between North and South, would require payment to risk assisting us. Each coin spent was a gamble, too little, and the trust necessary for the operation would falter. Too much, and we risked leaving ourselves without resources should obstacles arise. Counting, recounting, and distributing the gold became an exercise in strategy, ensuring that we retained enough for both sustenance and emergency extraction. The final piece of the puzzle was timing. Garden parties, servants' rotations, and seasonal absences of certain guards all had to align. The Wilkes household's schedule was rigid, yet predictable, and it was within those predictable moments that opportunity lay. Gabriel, one of Solomon's trusted contacts, provided insight into these patterns, offering access to hired servants who could facilitate entry and egress. We mapped every hallway, every staircase, every garden path, and storage shed that might play a role. Each scenario was rehearsed, contingencies considered, alternate exits prepared. I spent long nights awake, sometimes pacing, sometimes staring at the darkened sky, imagining Esther's life in the Wilkes house. My mind conjured the cruelty she might endure, the isolation, the enforced obedience, and the constant shadow of fear. But it also painted her intelligence, her quickness, her gentle manner that had survived despite years of oppression. I clung to that image, knowing it would be the key to reaching her safely. Her ability to read, to understand coded instructions, gave me hope. It was not simply the physical journey that mattered, but the mental alignment between us, a shared understanding that even in captivity, her mind had remained free. Solomon and I debated endlessly the sequence of movements. Would we approach during a social event, when the household was distracted, or under cover of darkness, risking the vigilance of nighttime guards? Each choice carried risk and reward, and the decision was never taken lightly. The stakes were not simply freedom. A single misstep could cost Esther her life or ours. But we were no longer passive. We were active agents in the reclamation of our family, and with every plan refined, every piece of intelligence gathered, our confidence grew. Finally, the day came when the preparations were complete. Documents forged, gold distributed for safe passage, contacts briefed, and routes memorized. Every element converged, and we felt the weight of inevitability. This journey, fraught with peril, could not be delayed further. My heart tightened at the thought of entering Charleston, of walking streets patrolled by those who would see me as a threat, a fugitive, a criminal. Yet the resolve within me was absolute. I would see Esther again. I would reclaim her, no matter the obstacles, no matter the danger. Solomon's hand on my shoulder, steady and unwavering, was a silent promise that we would face this together. As evening fell, the shadows lengthened over the quiet Canadian settlement. Naomi and Daniel embraced us, their eyes reflecting worry and hope in equal measure. "Bring her home," Daniel whispered, and I held him tight, feeling the weight of responsibility and the journey south would test every skill, every ounce of courage. But for the first time since Esther's abduction, I felt the path to reunion crystallize before me. Freedom had been claimed for ourselves. Now it was time to extend that freedom to the daughter, who had been torn from my arms so long ago. The journey south from Canada into the heart of the American South was unlike anything I had faced before. We moved cautiously, traveling by night whenever possible, slipping through small settlements, hiding in barns or behind fences during the day. Each stop had been planned by Solomon, using the network of abolitionists and free blacks who risked their lives to guide us. Our forged papers allowed us to pass inspection at checkpoints, but we never lingered long enough for suspicion to build. The air was heavy with tension, and each shadow could conceal a pursuer or an enemy. By the time we reached Charleston, I felt the weight of history pressing down on me. The city loomed large, its streets bustling with commerce, wealth, and the ever-present machinery of slavery. Even in the free black community that offered us shelter, I could sense the pervasive eyes of those who enforced the chains upon human beings. Gabriel met us there, a lifeline and an anchor. His knowledge of the city, its guards, and the Wilkes household's routines was invaluable. Together, we planned the precise moment to move, the roles each of us would play, and the signals to communicate when danger approached. Disguised as servants in the employ of a visiting abolitionist, Solomon and I approached the Wilkes estate on a warm May afternoon. The grandeur of the house struck me immediately. The tall windows, polished steps, and perfectly manicured gardens a stark contrast to the harsh lives of those who labored to maintain them. Every detail was designed to intimidate and to control. We presented our forged credentials with careful confidence, offering our services as additional attendants for a garden party. The household accepted without hesitation, our papers well-crafted and convincing, our demeanor practiced to perfection. Inside we moved like ghosts, shadows among shadows. I was assigned to the rear terrace to serve refreshments to the female guests, while Solomon tended to the men in the front parlor. Every moment required vigilance. My eyes scanned every corner, every doorway, every servant's movements. Time crawled as I searched for a sign of Esther, my heart a tight knot of anticipation. Gabriel had advised that she would most likely remain near Miss Caroline, performing her duties with obedience drilled into her by years of servitude. Finding her would require patience and stealth, and the smallest misstep could unravel everything we had worked toward. Hours passed in a tense blur. I kept my hands moving, refilling glasses, arranging trays, nodding politely to the ladies, all while my gaze swept the corridors and staircases. I listened for the subtle cadence of a voice I knew, soft and precise, speaking in the tones of obedience, yet carrying a spark of intelligence. And then, a faint sound caught my attention. A young girl's voice, speaking to someone just out of sight. "Esther, would you fetch my shawl?" The blue one, I think. Mother says I shouldn't get chilled. My heart lurched. The voice, even after 4 years, was unmistakable. I froze for a heartbeat, listening for the response. It was too soft to make out, but the tone, the rhythm, the cadence. I moved quietly toward the hallway, every nerve taut with anticipation. At the far end, a slender figure in a simple gray dress ascended the stairs, her movements careful, precise. My breath caught, my legs carrying me forward despite the tremor that threatened to undo me. I whispered her name, soft and urgent. Recognition flared in her eyes, disbelief followed, and then a surge of understanding. "Mama," she breathed, her voice barely audible. My arms instinctively reached for her, drawing her close. She melted against me, no longer a child, yet still my Esther in every essential way. Fear immediately took hold of her expression. "You can't be here," she whispered. "If they find you," I cut her off, urgency threading my tone. "I've come to take you home. Canada, free. Your brother Daniel, he's waiting for you. You're free now." A mixture of hope and terror crossed her face. She shook her head, confusion and obedience warring in her young heart. "It's impossible. Mr. Wilkes has guards, dogs, and Miss Caroline. She needs me. She's very ill." I held her gaze, my voice steady. "I'll get you out. Trust me. I've planned every detail, and tonight we leave." Before I could say more, a sharp call echoed from upstairs. "Esther, what's taking so long?" Her response was immediate, practiced. "Coming, Miss Caroline." Instantly, the child who had been my daughter became the obedient servant, the mask she had worn every day of her life. She glanced at me one last time, eyes filled with silent communication, and then disappeared upstairs. My heart pounded, and I returned to my duties, every movement calculated, every glance a signal to Solomon that we had made contact. The remainder of the afternoon crawled by. I served, refilled, and observed, each moment stretching endless. Finally, as twilight descended and the garden party wound down, we prepared for the evening phase of our plan. Every detail we had rehearsed was about to be tested in the most dangerous environment imaginable. Esther was near, and the possibility of reunion and escape lay within reach, but only if we moved with precision, courage, and the quiet coordination that had been painstakingly built over weeks of planning. Twilight settled over Charleston like a slow, suffocating veil, and with it, the city streets became shadows, alleys whispered secrets, and the risk of discovery climbed with every passing moment. Solomon and I had spent the afternoon moving through our roles as attendants, our eyes constantly darting for a sign from Esther. Every nod, every subtle hand motion between us was a lifeline of silent communication. And now, as the last of the garden party guests drifted away, the time had come to move, to turn months of careful planning into action. The designated meeting spot was a small, dark garden shed at the edge of the Wilkes estate. It smelled of soil, fertilizer, and damp wood, a sharp contrast to the perfumed luxury of the house. I arrived first, sliding the door open and slipping inside. Solomon followed moments later, his presence steady, reassuring. We crouched in the shadows, ears straining for the smallest sound, ready for the first sign of danger. The stormy night in Canada had been replaced by the humid, stifling southern evening, and even the insects seemed to hold their breath as we waited. Minutes stretched into an hour, each moment a test of patience and nerve. "She may not be able to get away," Solomon whispered, his voice barely audible. "There might be too many obstacles." I shook my head, my resolve unwavering. "She'll come. You'll see." My heart raced, but I knew in my bones that Esther was clever, resourceful, and above all determined. She had survived years of servitude, mastering the subtleties of obedience while keeping her inner self alive. She would find a way. And then, just as the church bells in the distance struck midnight, a faint creak announced the opening of the shed door. A slender figure slipped inside, clutching a small bundle to her chest. "Mama," she whispered, voice trembling but unmistakable. I sprang forward, gathering her into my arms. She had grown taller, her body no longer that of a child. Yet her essence, the way she melted into my embrace, the tilt of her head, was unchanged. Tears blurred my vision, mixing with the sweat and grime of our journey, but there was no time for sentiment. Every second mattered. "We have to hurry," she said urgently, breaking the embrace. "Miss Caroline is asleep, but the house servants will check on her soon and notice I'm gone." I held her hand, squeezing gently. "Then we leave now," I said. Solomon had already taken his position, ready to guide us through the estate's hidden paths. Gabriel waited outside with a cart, its presence a silent promise of mobility, of escape. We moved quickly, our shadows merging with the night as we made our way through the maze of gardens, careful to avoid the guards and the flickering lanterns of patrolling footmen. A sudden flare of light caught our attention, a lantern igniting along the garden path. A man's voice called out, "Who's there?" One of the Wilkes guards, making his rounds. Instinct took over. Solomon pressed us into the dense shadows of a large hedge, holding his body rigid as the man passed mere feet from us. "Stay still," he whispered. My heart thundered, but Esther remained calm, trusting me completely, her small hand clutching mine. Minutes passed like hours until the guard's footsteps faded, and Solomon finally motioned us forward. "The way is clear. Quickly," he urged, and we sprinted the remaining distance to the cart. Gabriel's presence was a comfort. He helped Esther into the back, and we concealed ourselves beneath burlap sacks, the coarse fabric pressing against our skin as we tried to steady our breathing. Solomon climbed up beside Gabriel on the driver's bench, and the cart lurched forward, carrying us through Charleston's darkened street. The rhythm of the wheels over cobblestones became a heartbeat of freedom. "Are we really going to be free?" she asked, voice quivering, barely audible over the cart's movement. I held her close, feeling the pulse of life, the resilience, the spark that had carried her through years of oppression. "Yes," I promised, my voice steady, though my heart was a tempest of fear and relief. "We already are. Tonight we reclaim what was stolen from us." She buried her face in my shoulder, and for a moment, the weight of 4 years of pain, separation, and planning lifted, replaced by the fragile warmth of hope. The journey to the docks was treacherous but unbroken. Each alley, each turn of the city streets required vigilance, every shadow scrutinized for potential threats. Yet the network of allies we had relied upon, combined with careful timing and the courage of Solomon and Gabriel, guided us successfully. By the time the sympathetic ship captain took us aboard his vessel, hiding us beneath crates and tarps, the first rays of dawn were stretching over the Charleston harbor. The city, which had been a cage, now receded behind us, leaving only the uncertain, exhilarating promise of freedom ahead. The first hours aboard the ship were a mixture of relief and tense anticipation. Esther, nestled against me beneath the tarps, was quiet, her small body trembling from exhaustion and residual fear. Solomon sat close by, his hand occasionally brushing mine, a silent reassurance that we were not alone in this perilous venture. Outside, the harbor waters stretched dark and choppy, reflecting the pale light of dawn. The ship's crew, loyal to the cause and aware of our true identities, moved with practiced care, ensuring no eyes would discover the small band of fugitives hidden in the bowels of the vessel. The journey north was neither swift nor smooth. We encountered storms along the Atlantic, the rain beating relentlessly against the deck, wind lashing and waves threatening to overtake the vessel. Each night Esther clung to me, her whispering questions about Daniel and the world beyond Charleston testing my composure. I told her stories, half-truths interwoven with hope, trying to paint a picture of the freedom that awaited. Each tale was a promise we could barely afford to hope for, yet necessary to keep the flame of courage alive within her young heart. Even with the safety of our ship, the risk of discovery was never absent. Slave catchers patrolled the coast, often in unmarked vessels, seeking escapees with the same zeal as those who had sold us into bondage. Every shadow on the water, every distant sail was a potential threat. Solomon had anticipated this, having communicated with contacts along the route who would provide safe harbor if the need arose. Our journey was punctuated with stops at secluded coves, islands where sympathetic fishermen offered fresh water and provisions, and hidden docks where abolitionist allies waited quietly to assist in our passage. The days blurred together. Esther slowly began to relax, though the tight grip of fear remained in her eyes. I observed her closely, noting how she carried herself differently than when last I had seen her. The education and refinement Wilkes had imposed upon her as a companion had left its mark. She walked with a poised confidence, her manners refined, her speech careful and measured. Yet beneath the polish, the spark of her childhood, the curiosity, the cleverness, the tenacity, remained intact. Each small smile she offered, each shy laugh, was a reminder of why this journey mattered so profoundly. Solomon proved an unwavering anchor. He navigated the logistical challenges. His foresight and experience were the difference between success and disaster, and I leaned on his guidance more than I dared admit. Our alliance, forged in the fires of escape planning, had grown into something more than strategy. It was trust, and in a world that offered us so little, trust was invaluable. Finally, after nearly 3 weeks at sea, and navigating the labyrinth of secret harbors and safe houses along the way, the northern shore emerged, a faint sliver of promise against the grey horizon. The ship docked quietly under the cover of night, and we were ferried to a small community of freed black settlers near St. Catharines, Ontario. Relief was immediate, though tempered with the awareness that freedom had its own complexities. Here, under British law, we were beyond the reach of American slave catchers and the Fugitive Slave Act. The tangible weight of chains, both physical and psychological, began to lift from our shoulders. As we stepped onto solid ground, the soil beneath our feet felt unfamiliar but alive, rich with possibility. The community welcomed us cautiously but warmly, aware of the dangers we had faced and the risks that remained. Our arrival coincided with the setting of a vivid sunset, the sky awash with golds and purples, as if the heavens themselves were acknowledging our passage from bondage into freedom. Esther clung to me tightly, finally allowing herself to release some of the tension that had built over years of captivity and months of flight. In the following days, we began the slow process of establishing a new life. I found work as a laundress, tasks that were physically demanding yet offered stability and routine, a necessary balm after months of constant danger. Solomon applied his skills as a carpenter, constructing furniture and assisting in building projects within the community. Daniel, now 15, apprenticed with a blacksmith, learning the trade that would eventually allow him to thrive independently. Esther, ever curious and intelligent, began to absorb the freedoms around her, learning that life beyond servitude was complex, demanding, and for the first time, her own to navigate. Even as we settled, our thoughts were never far from the work that remained. The gold coins I had taken from Jenkins' safe were a lifeline, not merely for immediate survival, but as a means to aid others still trapped in bondage. Each coin represented hope, each expenditure a chance to alter the course of another's life. Letters from Southern contacts kept us informed of Jenkins' continuing downfall, his financial ruin, now a slow, inevitable process, amplified by the loss of the Richmond contract and the mysterious disappearance of his accounting ledgers. While I did not dwell on vengeance, the knowledge of his suffering brought a quiet sense of justice, tempered with reflection on the cost of the actions that had led us here. By the time our new routine solidified, the reality of our freedom settled fully into our minds. We were safer now, and with resources, allies, and courage, the next chapter of our lives could begin. Freedom, hard-won and precarious, was no longer an abstract dream, but a tangible, lived reality. Esther, Daniel, Solomon, and I, bound together by blood, love, and struggle, had arrived in a land that promised not only survival, but the possibility of thriving, a world in which the shadows of slavery could no longer reach us. The first weeks in St. Catharines were filled with a mixture of exhaustion and cautious optimism. Every step felt heavy with the weight of years spent under Jenkins' tyranny, yet each moment of peace reminded us of what we had fought for. Esther slowly began to understand that this new life, strange and overwhelming though it was, could be her own. She moved with tentative confidence, exploring the small community, her eyes wide with curiosity and wonder at the freedom surrounding her. For the first time, she could run without fear, laugh without punishment, and speak her mind without censorship. I found work as a laundress in the home of a Quaker family sympathetic to our cause. The labor was taxing, hands immersed in cold water and soap, yet there was a dignity to it, a rhythm that anchored me after months of relentless flight and fear. The family treated us with respect, never questioning our past, never treating us as property. They offered meals and lodging, and sometimes words of wisdom. Their presence reminded me that humanity was not uniform, that there existed pockets of kindness even in a world built on oppression. Solomon's skills as a carpenter became indispensable. He repaired homes, built furniture, and occasionally took on larger construction projects for the community. His work earned him respect and gratitude, providing both income and a sense of purpose. Daniel adapted quickly to the routines of apprenticeship under a local blacksmith. His hands, once small and tentative, now moved with the precision and strength of a young man learning a craft that could secure his independence. I watched him often, pride and relief, mixing with a twinge of sorrow for the years stolen from his childhood. Yet in the hammering of metal, the sparks flying in the evening light, I saw resilience, a testament to survival and growth beyond the reach of slavery. Esther, ever observant, absorbed everything with an insatiable hunger for knowledge. Her Wilkes education had given her the ability to read and write, skills most slaves could never hope to acquire. Now, freed from the constraints of servitude, she began to read for pleasure, devouring books lent by sympathetic neighbors, Quaker families, and community libraries. Her gentle nature made her a natural teacher, and soon she was helping younger children in the settlement learn to read and write, passing along the tools that might one day allow them to escape oppression as we had. The gold from Jenkins' safe became our silent ally, a lifeline for both immediate and long-term plans. Each coin was carefully apportioned, some to support our own needs, some to assist other escapees still making their way north. Through contacts in the Underground Railroad, letters, and trusted intermediaries, we financed safe passage for several families, each one a triumph that felt like a small victory over the system that had enslaved us. The weight of the gold was more than monetary. It symbolized freedom, leverage, and the power to right in some small measure the wrongs inflicted by men like Jenkins. Yet freedom did not erase the scars of our past. Nights were restless, memories of whipping, of Marcus hanging from that tree, of Esther's stolen childhood, haunted our dreams. Esther occasionally flinched at sudden noises, nightmares reminding her of the oppressive household she had endured. But slowly, with the steady presence of Solomon, Daniel, Naomi, and me, she began to heal. Our household became a sanctuary, a place of laughter, learning, and security, a stark contrast to the plantations we had fled. Over the months, we worked to establish routines and a sense of normalcy. Daily life was punctuated by work, learning, and community engagement. I taught Esther practical skills, from cooking traditional recipes of our ancestors to managing household affairs. Solomon strengthened the community infrastructure, helping to build homes and workshops. Daniel continued his apprenticeship, while Esther's teaching grew to include other children arriving from the South, expanding the circle of knowledge and empowerment. Our lives became a network of small victories, each one an assertion of our humanity, each day a testament to the freedom we had fought to claim. News from the South reached us sporadically. Letters informed us of Jenkins' ongoing financial ruin. The Richmond merchant had sued, demanding restitution for lost tobacco, and the disappearance of his ledgers had caused irreparable damage to his business. We read these updates with a mixture of caution and satisfaction. Not gloating, but a measured acknowledgement that justice, however slow and imperfect, was unfolding. These messages reminded us that our efforts had consequences far beyond our immediate escape. Our actions had disrupted the empire that had sought to enslave us, a disruption that rippled through the world we had left behind. Amid these adjustments, the most profound change was the restoration of family bonds. Seeing Esther flourish, learning, teaching, and beginning to reclaim her childhood in the context of freedom, filled me with a sense of purpose I had not dared imagine during our long, harrowing journey. Daniel, now able to walk without fear, found his own sense of identity, strengthened by the knowledge that he was no longer at the mercy of owners or overseers. Solomon's presence offered both practical assistance and emotional support, the bond between us deepening into one of partnership, trust, and unspoken love. In the quiet moments, as I watched Esther teaching, Daniel practicing his craft, and Solomon working with the community, I understood the true significance of freedom. It was not merely the absence of chains, but the presence of opportunity, the ability to choose one's path, the right to nurture family, and the chance to repair what had been broken. In these moments, the horrors of our past were not erased, but they were transformed into motivation, into the energy that propelled us toward a future of agency, dignity, even as we settled into a rhythm of relative peace in St. Catherine's. My thoughts were never far from Esther. Each day that passed without her was another day stolen, another year of her life controlled by strangers. The letters confirming her presence in Charleston brought both hope and dread. She was alive, yes, but the city was a labyrinth of danger, patrolled by slave catchers, guarded households, and constant scrutiny. Every step toward her freedom would require precision, courage, and an unyielding commitment to secrecy. I began by mapping every detail I could gather from Solomon's contacts and correspondence. We had allies in Charleston, free black citizens who understood the risks, sympathetic ship captains who could aid in covert travel, and abolitionists who had long operated under the radar of city authorities. I committed each name, each route, each contingency plan to memory. To outsiders, these were ordinary pieces of information, but for us, they were the blueprint for Esther's liberation. Every misstep could be fatal. Every delay could cost her another moment of her stolen childhood. Solomon became both partner and confidant in this operation. His knowledge of southern cities, combined with his carpentry skills and past experience aiding fugitives, made him indispensable. Together, we devised a plan to enter Charleston under the guise of free black servants, accompanying a white abolitionist. Forged papers would identify us legally as free citizens, though the legality of such documents often depended entirely on the discretion of any given official. We rehearsed our story, anticipated questions, and practiced subtle cues that would alert each other to danger. Our journey would require moving mostly by night, avoiding main roads, and using the network of trusted allies to navigate each checkpoint. The gold coins from Jenkins' safe became a lifeline in our plan. They would provide the funds to hire guides, secure temporary shelter, and bribe any particularly stubborn officials if necessary. Each coin felt heavier now with responsibility, currency not merely of wealth, but of freedom itself. I counted and recounted them, imagining how each one could transform a step of our journey from peril to safety. We could not afford mistakes. We could not afford hesitation. We were no longer escaping merely for ourselves. We were retrieving a child stolen from her mother, reclaiming a life that had been cruelly taken. Our first task was reconnaissance. Solomon traveled ahead under the pretense of surveying labor opportunities in Charleston, while I remained in St. Catherine's to manage preparations and coordinate with our network. Reports trickled back slowly. The Wilkes household was fortified, their staff vigilant, Miss Caroline's illness drawing constant attention, and guards stationed at key points. Esther's duties were demanding. She was tasked with serving Caroline and other family members, her movements monitored closely, yet there were cracks in their vigilance. Occasional errands and moments when the family entertained visitors offered small windows of opportunity. Each detail, no matter how minor, was recorded and memorized. I considered the risks constant. Discovery could mean not only the loss of Esther again, but imprisonment, severe corporal punishment, or even death for both Solomon and me. We prepared for contingencies, alternate routes to the docks, hidden caches along the city outskirts, and signals with allies who could intervene if immediate extraction became impossible. Each plan was layered with redundancies, anticipating the unpredictability of human error and chance encounters with officials or suspicious neighbors. Fear was present, yes, but it sharpened my focus rather than paralyzing it. Training Esther was the next challenge. Though we had yet to meet in Charleston, we had to ensure she could act quickly and safely if the opportunity arose. Through coded letters and messages carried by trusted intermediaries, I sent instructions for small, incremental tests. Routes within the household she might navigate unnoticed, cues for when a servant might be left unsupervised, methods to carry small items without detection. Each suggestion had to be subtle, a whisper hidden in plain sight, ensuring she could move when the moment arrived without arousing suspicion. Weeks passed with tension mounting. Every evening I reviewed plans with Solomon, revising routes, adjusting schedules, and preparing mentally for every possible setback. I could not allow myself to dwell on the possibility of failure. Doing so would cloud judgment. Every action, every decision had to be precise. And yet beneath the urgency and planning, there was a quiet, growing hope. Hope that Esther, now a young girl of 11 or 12, clever and observant, would recognize the moment and act with courage. Hope that our combined skills, the network we had built, and the careful orchestration of each step would culminate in success. Finally, the evening arrived when all preparations were complete. Our forged papers were tested and deemed convincing. Allies were in position, and the signal for Esther's extraction had been established. Solomon and I gathered our supplies, clothing to blend with household staff, maps, tools for covert movement, and the pouch of gold for contingencies. The journey into Charleston would begin under the cloak of night, a dangerous dance through the heart of a city that represented both her imprisonment and our opportunity for liberation. We paused together before departure, the weight of our mission pressing upon us, the stakes higher than any we had faced. Solomon's hand rested on mine, offering strength and silent reassurance. I met his gaze and felt resolve harden within me. This was more than a journey for freedom. It was the reclamation of a stolen life, the undoing of injustice, and the chance to restore family bonds torn apart by greed and cruelty. There was no turning back. Tonight, we would step into the shadows of Charleston, and into the future we had fought so long to reach. The day of the garden party arrived with a humidity that clung to every surface, a thick heat pressing down on Charleston. Solomon and I approached the Wilkes estate under morning shadows, our forged papers naming us as hired attendants for a visiting abolitionist. Every step toward those marble steps made my pulse quicken. Each glance from a guard or servant carried the threat of exposure. Inside, the house thrummed with preparations, silver-polished, lanterns hung, violins tuned for the evening. I moved among the temporary staff, my movements measured, my eyes scanning the hallways for a single familiar face. The scent of magnolias drifted through the open windows, sickly sweet, masking the dread that coiled in my stomach. Then I heard it, a girl's voice from an adjoining corridor. "Esther, would you fetch my shawl? The blue one." My hands trembled. I turned, and there she was, taller, graceful, dressed plainly in gray. Her eyes carried the same brightness I'd memorized years ago. "Esther," I whispered. She froze, disbelief flickering into recognition. "Mama?" The word left her lips like a prayer. I caught her hand. "Quiet now. We don't have long." Her gaze darted toward the parlor. "He'll punish us if we're caught. He'll never touch you again," I said. "We leave tonight." The hours until dusk crawled by. When the sun began to sink and music swelled from the garden, Solomon signaled. Guests were laughing, guards distracted by drink. Esther slipped beside me through the servants' passage. We crossed the lawn, our feet silent on the damp grass. Each shadow became our ally, each breath measured. At the rear hedge stood Solomon, waiting near the garden shed. Esther reached him first, clutching a small satchel. We hid inside among rakes and burlap sacks, the smell of earth thick around us. For a moment we simply breathed, three fugitives bound by faith and desperation. I pulled her close. 4 years vanished in that embrace. "You've grown so much," I whispered, "but you're still my baby." A whistle sounded from the far side of the property. Gabriel's signal. We slipped from the shed, crossed the backfield, and reached the waiting cart. Esther and I ducked beneath canvas as Solomon joined Gabriel on the driver's seat. The wheels began to turn, bumping down the dirt lane toward the docks. Behind us, the Wilkes mansion glowed like a lantern in the night, unaware that its prize servant was gone forever. The harbor smelled of salt and smoke. Our ship waited, small and sturdy, crewed by men who asked no questions. As we boarded, Esther clung to my arm, whispering, "Are we really free now?" I kissed her forehead. "Not yet, but soon." The voyage north was a blur of wind, rain, and whispered prayers. Esther fell ill once, shivering from the cold, but Solomon tended to her, wrapping her in blankets, telling gentle stories until she slept. Each mile carried us farther from chains and closer to promise. I spent long nights on deck staring at the stars, the same stars that had watched over our ancestors. For the first time, they felt like guides rather than distant witnesses to our suffering. Weeks later, the mist parted to reveal the rocky shoreline of Canada. When our feet touched the sand, Esther knelt and pressed her hands into the soil. "It's real," she said softly. "No one owns us here." We made our way inland to St. Catherine's, the same community that had sheltered Daniel and me months before. I saw him waiting near the chapel, taller now, shoulders broad from blacksmithing. When he spotted us, he broke into a run. Esther leapt from the cart before it stopped, and they collided in an embrace that tore a sob from my chest. For a long moment, the three of us clung together, the wind carrying away the years of loss. Life resumed, but everything felt transformed. Our home filled with laughter and the rhythm of ordinary life. Hammering from Daniel's forge, Esther's soft singing as she read to neighborhood children, Solomon's steady steps across the porch. At night, when the oil lamp flickered low, I watched them both and whispered thanks to every unseen hand that had guided us here. Freedom, I learned, was not a single moment but a daily practice. Waking without fear, working with dignity, loving without permission. The scars of slavery remained, etched into memory and flesh, but they no longer defined us. We had taken back what the world had tried to erase: our names, our family, our future. Sometimes, when the wind blew from the south, carrying faint traces of tobacco and salt, I thought of the Jenkins estate and the men who had profited from our suffering. I felt no need for vengeance anymore. The greatest revenge was this life. The sound of Esther's laughter, the weight of Daniel's arm around my shoulders, the warmth of Solomon's hand in mine. I had burned a dynasty to the ground, but in its ashes we built something lasting, a family free under open skies.